The way that a species is best to survive is to use the information they sense and react in ways that enhance their existence. An organism that does that best will live better and have its progeny live successfully. I believe everybody is familiar with the survival of the fittest. In the early evolution of humans, there were quite a few kinds of humans that trod the earth. In the book Last Humans, they documented that there were 22 different species of humans during the last 4 million years. When these different types of humans interacted, there was a fierce competition for food, water, shelter, and mates. There were raids on neighboring population to seize tools, workers, supplies, and whatever else was needed to keep that group thriving. The dominant force survived, and the weaker force diminished. Other things were also happening. Brains were getting bigger, which allowed a more accurate perception of reality. The brains also grew keener with experience. It was likely noticed that acts of kindness among humans were often reciprocated with returned kindness. So new processes like kindness were creeping into the practice and being noticed. As time went forward, the number of human species slowly dwindled to just one, Homo sapiens. All the others were driven to extinction. To raid, kill, take slaves, and supplement your own stores survived for a very, very long period of time. It was taught from parent to child, from generation to generation, and was thought to be the way of life. So, Homo sapiens got very good at practicing that way of life. They soon realized, however, that there were two forces at work in this survival process. The first was to keep doing what they had been doing. If it ain't fixed, don't break it. And the other was the growing realization that changes are needed to make the group's survival edge even keener. These two processes are in constant conflict even today. Along the way, the spiritual aspects of humankind were also under development. The larger brain size gave a better perception of the world. Humans were able to reflect upon their own actions to predict into the future. Developed a belief that they were very special things among all living things. It was a very small jump to begin to believe that the world was in fact made for humans by some divine entity that could explain their existence. A god or a set of gods of their very own was created to explain things and make meaning of their existence clear. God creation was shared by various forms of all humans. It was handed down for tens of thousands of years. We came to believe that we were the center of God's concern. We came to believe that we were the center of the universe. Along the way, however, there were some bumps in the road. And those bumps eventually forced a different viewpoint to emerge. Social and scientific realizations brought forth these bumps. A couple of examples of individuals who presented these bumps were Jesus, who challenged the social norms, and Galileo, who discovered some scientific realizations. Jesus put forth the idea that there was more than one way to defeat your enemy. You may slay your enemy, as was done from the very beginning, or you can love your enemy. By loving, you have eliminated your enemy, and there was now a companion to help you. The idea was radical and did not fit into the social scheme at that time. The bump was a new perception that could change the social order. It brought fear because it shifted the power structure. You know the history of that bump, and you realize that it was huge. Now let's look into some technical bumps. These occurred because our perception ability was improving in the scientific realm as well as the social realm. This bump was a result of a recent rise in technology that extended the human observational capabilities. Advances in optics led to the formation of lenses, and eventually images could be formed using those lenses. And by combining a pair of lenses, you could produce something like a telescope, which is what Galileo did in 1610. Humans had long thought we had been placed at the center of the universe. So we believed that all things traveled around the earth in perfect circles, because God was perfect. For a very long time, the motion of the planets and the changes of the seasons and many other astronomical things were always explained by incorporating an Earth-centered perspective. However, as things advanced, it became very difficult to explain planetary motion and astronomy given the Earth-centered premise. So Galileo looked through his telescope in January of 1610, and he saw Jupiter and three similar objects that he assumed were stars that were too dim to see without his telescope. All was still well. However, during a later observation, one of the stars disappeared, and then subsequently reappeared. He watched closely over a long period of time and concluded that the stars were actually moons orbiting Jupiter. These moons were not going around the Earth. And so there was a conflict between what he saw and what the church said about how God created the universe. This observation and conclusions indicated that the Earth was not the center of the universe anymore. And this was a major bump. The difference between the Jesus bump and the Galileo bump is that the Galileo bump had repeatable data to back it up. However, at the time, sight was viewed differently. Sight was thought to be a property of the eyes. The eyes reached out and felt the surroundings. So that, therefore, it was declared that the telescope was casting a spell on one's sight and could not be trusted. Priests and officials would not even look through the telescope. For bringing this bump to the attention of the Pope, Galileo was placed under house arrest, which lasted for the rest of his life. About the same time, Kepler tried to explain the motion of the planets, and the planets did weird things. They would go across the sky, and then they back up a little bit, and then they go back across the sky. This is difficult to explain using perfect circles. So he proposed that there was a heliocentric universe where the Earth and the planets went around the sun, not in circles, but ellipses. It made the Earth, therefore, and therefore humans, much less the center of the universe. It was therefore ardently rejected by the Church. The technical bumps increased in frequency. Genetics with Mendel, Darwin's origin theories challenged the creation stories. Both of those things did. Plate tectonics, organic radioactive dating challenged the long-believed concept that the Earth was only 6,000 years old. The bumps came faster and with more fury. However, the desire for the continuance of the process that allowed us to be survivors for such a long time was very strong. So many humans kept doing what they were doing for millennia, refusing to change their belief systems in spite of the contrary scientific evidence. Some belief systems were more flagrant than their denial than Christianity, and some were more accommodating to the recognition of reality. Everybody, every person here, holds false beliefs as part of their view of reality. That ability, as far as we know, is what separates our life form from most other life forms. It may even be a key ingredient in the development of any form of consciousness. Regardless of its nature, however, we can get closer to the truth by asking questions that best test what we believe. In other words, we get closer to the truth by promoting a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, which is our fourth principle. After a brief musical interlude, we will look into the future bumps that will again challenge us, both as humans and UUs, to make responsible belief changes in our belief structure. Those choices will bring us closer to reality and also serve to improve our survival edge. What are the future bumps that we face? Currently, there's global warming. Ever since it was predicted in 1938 by Guy Callendar, the traditionalists have denied it. There's also the specter of pollution from forever chemicals and plastics. It will certainly affect our livelihood and our lives. Population growth and resource depletion are long-standing concerns which science has addressed in the past and done a fairly good job of helping to mitigate. The list of bumps is long and increasing in number and frequency. It's as the increase in information increases, so do the bumps, and our vision of reality has to be refined closer and closer. We recognize more of the falsehoods we have. We, as you use, are aware of the evidence that supports the recognition of these bumps. All bumps face similar challenges, but I'll focus on one that is recently popular and a dramatic bump of our time, which is the rise of artificial intelligence. We all have marveled when we've taken the time to reflect on our own existence. The rise and recognition of consciousness has fascinated most of us. Just a couple of generations ago, feelings and pleasure and thought processes and conscious learning in animals was thought to be a complete fantasy for any animal except humans. Just 150 years ago, Pavlov's dog proved that dogs could learn something abstract. That was something really new, and that was only 150 years ago. However, recent experiments and data have rebuked most of the conclusions about our ideas of consciousness in other beings. As Mark had pointed out in his remarks, it is now recognized that there is consciousness in a host of animals. For example, whales speak to each other, as do porpoises. The octopus is recognized as being curious and intelligent enough to solve problems. There are signs of varying levels of consciousness throughout a host of living beings. So the questions concerning the implications of both natural intelligence and artificial intelligence are rampant. Will AI be the next bump in the road? From what I've read and studied, it seems that AI is based on two major items. First, the accumulation of a very large amount of information. Every time you buy something, that information goes into the database. Every time you click, take this survey, okay, that information goes into the database. Secondly, an algorithm used to extract, correlate that information, and assemble it into a presentable form. That's the second element of artificial intelligence. There's probably more, but I've divided them in those two. When we fuse together the extracted information, it can give the impression of intelligent reasoning by presenting facts that have been used in other similar situations. Thus, AI output provides an illusion of reasoning. The databases are growing larger and larger with additional information. The algorithms for extracting that information are becoming more intricate and cross-referential. So the illusion of consciousness grows. The thing we have a very difficult time, the thing that we will have a very difficult time determining is when the process moves from the level of illusion to the level of actual self-awareness in the machine. When that happens, oh, I got something going on here. That's the other me speaking. There we go. Okay. When that happens, thoughts internal to the machine could be self-evaluated and compared to hypothetical, non-real situations. Okay, when that happens. The possibility of independent machine thought will then be born. A new consciousness will become a possibility. The machine will become like us in one critical and novel way. It will be able to generate and believe things that are not true. It will become human-like in that respect. I believe that process is a long way off. In fact, the current model of AI shows that databases used by AI machines are becoming polluted with AI-generated information. An article I read recently stated that all models used to extrapolate the evolution of AI collapsed because the information became clogged with falsities. The number of false statements increased as the database became more polluted with AI-generated information. To correct this flaw, this is one idea I had. To correct this flaw, the AI algorithm must include a test to compare things that are proffered as real to reality. Like Einstein said, first you have to do the thought experiment before you do the experiment. So will AI take over? Not in its current form. It will have to become more independent of human data and must have an active sensory input check to check the truth of its conjectures. Then it must be given the ability to generate new statements that might be true and compare those generated ideas to experiment to see what part of the new conjecture or new idea is true. If it can do those things, then it may even be able to generate a feeling of self-worth. If these things happen, our UU principles will be taxed to consider these new things as sentient beings. Then we may be obliged to treat them with compassion, justice, equality, and inherent worth. Now that the inherent worth that they can now claim and demand. And what a bump that will be.